Welcome to the Strategy and Leadership Podcast, brought to you by SME Strategy. My name is Anthony Taylor, and I'm going to be your host today. On the Strategy and Leadership Podcast, we interview senior leaders and thought leaders to get their best practices for leading teams, for driving and executing strategy, and other best practices as it relates to leadership and team development. And our goal here on the Strategy and Leadership Podcast is to bring you practical and executable tips that you can use right away to support the growth of your organization or your business. So if you enjoy today's episode, please be sure to subscribe. You can follow us on YouTube for other bonus content on strategy and leadership, and you can join in on the conversation on Facebook in the Strategy and Leadership community. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. My guest today is Nick Davis, who is the managing partner at Reaching the Future Faster and also the author of Future Ready, a changemaker's guide to the exponential revolution. Nick, how are you today?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I am excited to chat. If we just get right into it, I know you've got a lot of titles and a lot of things you do just like for work and in the community. Tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what keeps you busy.
Yes, I mean, the common thread for the work that I do is really, kind of more advanced technology and kind of strategy as it relates to, navigating the uncertain future ahead. And so, I'm, as you said, one of the managing partners at Reaching the Future Faster, which is the consulting firm that we do and work with our partners around the world through. I'm also the faculty chair of innovation at Singularity University. So I worked there for a number of years, actually running our enterprise solutions team globally. But I still remain, one of our lead faculty members there in that particular arena. I'm the chief platform officer of the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. So for any listeners who are from the Midwest, I actually live and reside in Columbus, Ohio. We're the largest food bank in the state of Ohio, one of the largest in the nation, feeding about 175,000 people a day at this point. While we're talking, we're kind of in the middle of the COVID crisis, of course. So a lot of things are changing in our model and how we kind of meet the need for the hungry neighbor that we've got in the world. I also do venture capital. I'm a venture partner at Bold Capital out of Los Angeles, and then launching a new startup on upskilling and reskilling right now. So a lot of different things, but where they're all connected is yes, certainly trying to work on this idea for the future of work, upskilling and reskilling, and meeting the need around hunger. And the common thread is advanced technology.
All right, so we could probably go a bunch of different directions. Why don't you just tell me exactly what's going to happen in the future?
Well, it's easy. We're all going to just be flying around on spaceships and, the world will be perfectly clean. We don't have any idea. I laughingly tell people all the time that my running year for being able to just kind of throw all prediction models out the window is 2047. Anyone who says that they can kind of really tell you what the world's going to look like at that point or after is, in my opinion, my humble opinion, kind of making it up, right? And so, I think we have an idea I hope we have an idea for the world that we're trying to build, and trying to help come to fruition. The reader of the book would hear a lot about, the fact that, once we get into a certain kind of amount of years ahead, it really is less about predictive models and a lot more around, what do you want that world to be? And then what do you take, what actions do you take today to back up to help realize that future for yourself, your organization, or so on. And so, I think, if anything, this lesson that we've learned very intimately with COVID is that, the world is unpredictable. We sometimes are forced to take, very drastic actions and accelerate things to, working from home and, virtual conferencing, things, are thrown upon us. And, the technology can serve as a solution to help us take on those new challenges. And it can also obviously create some pretty serious issues. So, I think the future is of course, unknown. But ultimately what I would encourage anyone to think about is, it is within our power to build it. And so, how we find our way through that as a society, as a species is, hopefully the big task that we take on, and we do it in a great way.
I'm interested and curious about the intersection of everything that you've done. Because obviously you have the technology work that you do, you have the work that you do with the food bank, which presents its own set of perspectives, both from yourself and your stakeholders. At Singularity, you must see tons of different organizations, concepts, and things. And then obviously your primary work, reaching the future faster and doing the go-to-market. And then at the intersection of that, or at the crossroads, is this idea that we can't predict the future. Everything is uncertain, but we can create and shape the future. So if we think of this sort of COVID world and how leaders are looking to scenario planning to mitigate risk and uncertainty, is that an exercise in futility to try to imagine where the world is going and hedge our bets? And are there trends that you're seeing that are manifesting themselves, whether that's in technology and learning or food security and anything else? And then how do those sort of all of that amalgamation of data, information, prediction, and guessing help a leader and basically civilization be successful moving forward? That's a really big question. You can take that anywhere you want to go.
Easy question. Yeah. One thing you said, and this is kind of an interesting point to make to start that answer. I think we can predict the future, because ultimately the future is and can be 1 second from now, right? If I flip a coin, the physics and laws of nature tell me that, I predict it's going to land in my hand, and it's 50-50 chance it would be heads or tails or whatever, right? Like, depending on when we think that future that we're trying to predict is, obviously the further out that we go, the less certain we are. Right now, I think there's some really great modeling going on with the experts around the world on, how COVID is going to impact us as a species, at least in the short term, right? And it gets more certain the further we go out. And so what I'll often tell organizations and people that we work with is, the first question is, what timeline are you trying to understand, right? Like, so we can form a common language of where we're trying to gain an aligned understanding. And so for most of the companies that I've worked with and our teams have worked with, you really want to get an aligned vision first. I understand that you can read market trends. You can look at, globalization analysis, supply chain. You can do all the things that, McKinsey or Bain would do with you to kind of do just, typical 5-year scenario planning and economic analysis. It's going to only get you so far, right? You may get a view of the next few years ahead. There's still some uncertainty there. Market dynamics being what they are, there's reliability or unreliability there, depending on what industry you're in. What I'm really talking about is ultimately, 15 years from now, right? We know from just the last decade or so that, half or more of the, Fortune 200, 500 will most likely be changed, right? There'll be a reshuffling of the guard in that timeline. We know that change is going to happen. We know it's going to happen faster. We can wrap our heads around that, if you will. But, anyone who tells you 15 years from now, they can predict out what it's going to look like in the food industry to be able to distribute food, how we're ever going to figure out as a species why we're still leaving 40% of all product in the field while we've got millions of people going hungry, right? Like, it's an obvious problem. It's staring us in the face. There are incredibly smart people working on it, yet it still happens. And, and we're feeling that in a very visceral way these days. So I think we have to start by saying, this is the future that we want to attain. It's Singularity language. It's called a massive transformational purpose. Other people will tell you it's a vision statement. Elon Musk, I think, would give you an idea of the world that he wants to live in, being clean, autonomous, space travel, and so on. And great visionaries are great at building this out. But then you have to back up a few years and say, okay, well, if we're starting at 15 and then we walk back and we're still not being able to do full mapping at 6, 7, 8 years, right? 10 years. But we can get a little bit more certainty because we're getting closer to today. And then you can start to say, and what the book talks about is alternative scenario planning or alternative futures that you're testing. And so for me, what I like is then we can start to say, okay, what's the most probable future that we've got? What's the most disruptive that would happen to us? What's the most likely, unlikely? And you can start to build these different narratives that allow you to pressure test your understanding of what you think could happen in the world to get you to that 15-year future. And once you have them, that gives you a hypothesis and something to test against. And you can go back to today. So now you're talking 1-2 years away and say, if we know that those are the 5 futures that we think are possible, and we know this is the future 15 years that we're aiming for, what activity must we undertake today to realize the best possible path in that alternative future for us, and how we will ultimately achieve our overall vision? And for Musk, as the example, that may be, you know what, I know I'm going to lose money in investing in building in rockets now. But I know that 2 to 3 years from now, it's going to build a capability around rockets that, is not easily available for, even the government to attain. And then 2 or 3 years from that, I believe we'll have enough efficiencies built in from the work that we're doing to enable personal space travel, and so on, right? And so that ultimate long-term vision is achieved by taking those steps now to realize it. But that is real easy to say and real difficult to do. And so in the book, we try and lay out the different steps and examples for someone to undertake how they could achieve that, and bring that alignment to it. So it's chunking it up for you in a way that's, we can get buy-in from leaders who need to know what their role is in doing it. We can help the organization understand that vision and strategy. We can start to map out and communicate it to our stakeholders. All those things need to happen for it to work well, but you have to have it on kind of all those different timelines, and have everyone aligned to it, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. And, like basically having that understanding of that common future, that common vision, the common world that we want to live in. And in your case, 15 years down the road, but I'm sure it applies to everyone at varying timelines and scopes. When I see like certain schools or cities, they plan 25 or 50 years, depending on where you are in the world. And then working backwards from that. How do you see individual leaders sort of balancing that long picture, big picture, long-term thinking with like the in-demand needs right now, and said another way, the balance between strategic and operational? Because right now there's a lot of people who their businesses have been disrupted, and I assert that in the next year or two, as the chips fall, there's going to be more of it, or the fallout is going to be more pronounced. I was chatting with my wife yesterday, and she was saying that I think the big banks in New York own like 10% of the real estate. That if they don't decide not to renew their real estate, then it's going to impact all of these, bodegas and everybody that relies on commuter traffic. So how do people sort of react to those things in a world of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of research here in the last few years around this kind of ambidextrous thinking, and how do we zoom in and out is one model that I talk about in the book from one of our faculty, John Hagel from Deloitte. You hear other people talking about like the operator and the innovator mindset, and being able to toggle back and forth. I think there are all ways for us to be able to start to say, there's a need for us to be able to build that capability in each of us, and toggle back and forth between those two mindsets, and do it with a fair amount of ease. I think it was, in years past, okay for large organizations who had a fair amount of ability to leverage their resources to move slowly to say, I want my operators over here and I want my innovators over here. You go build some new ideas for us, and then we'll take those ideas and we'll move them over here to the people who are the viewers, and they'll do it. And then we'll just, that'll be our system that will manage the processes around. This world is moving too quickly for all of us to live in our one kind of paradigm. And so especially as, we move up in our career and we meet, we reach middle management or senior level management, I'll say for myself that, I'll be in one meeting where it's, it's high level strategy. What does the future of hunger look like, and where are we trying to meet the need? In the very next meeting, it's very tactical on, what is the engineering stack that we're looking to build into the app, and how are we going to leverage, machine learning to be able to do predictive outcomes for moving people through poverty. It's like deep engineering and operations. And then the very next half an hour, my brain is, strategy, vision, and growth. And we have to be able to turn that on and off, and know where the right place is for it. I think it's always sad for me to be, in meetings or with projects when, you've got, other stakeholders or partners on the project, and they're stuck in one mindset and they really can't switch back and forth. And people complain about the naysayers, or the people who say it's always been done this way, that we can't do it differently. And those are the people whose mindsets I think need to shift to this new paradigm, and really allow themselves the opportunity to say, This world is vastly accelerating, faster than we ever predicted, even when all these stories have been going on about acceleration for years now. It's happening even faster than they thought. Technologies are converging in ways that allow us to do a lot of this work better, smarter, faster, cheaper. And it's a great thing. Let's embrace it and let it do what it's meant to do, and kind of get out of the way where we're needed, or where we need to, and toggle back and forth. But it's certainly one of those things that's easier said than done. It takes practice. It's not perfect every time. It can be messy. I don't care who you are, myself included. We have times where, we're sitting in a meeting and we're just trying to get through it. And, you're just trying to get this thing moving and operating, and you lose sight of the long-term vision of where you're trying to take it. And that, could come at a cost. And so I think we have to practice it and hold each other accountable to doing it.
I really like that zoom in and out sort of perspective. When we look at it, we think about it like a telescope versus a magnifying glass. And depending on how close you are, you get a different level of perspective, and that you have the operator and innovator sort of paradigm. And that from what I hear is from you, is that it's not enough to be one or the other because of the speed of change, which I agree with. Is that how do we foster those things within like the duality of managers and leaders? And I think that if you're a up and coming manager and leader, that you have to be able to flex both of those muscles and work those out. And you said it very well, like the ambidextrousness of it, I really like. So my question to you, and you can, is both, how do you develop that skill? So if you have, actionable tips that our readers can take to be more future ready, or our listeners can be more future ready. So what can they do to develop that skill? 1 or 2 or 3 practical examples. And then what are the risks in doing it or not doing it that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think the main advice and the metaphor that we use in the book is under our leadership models is this idea of both being the wave of disruption and the surfer on it. So if you think about this, just kind of and picture this in your mind. We all think of disruption as this thing that happens to us, but in every disruption, for the most part, there's usually a culprit that's causing it. You can use your Amazons if you want from many industries these days, that's just trying to execute its business model. And by doing such, it tends to disrupt other incumbents who have been there for a while and may not have evolved as quickly or approaching it in more traditional ways. And so, there's the person who's capitalizing on the opportunity, and there's the person who's being disrupted by it. And ultimately for leaders, it's your job to say, am I going to be the person who sits and waits and lets this happen to me? Or am I going to be the person who steps out in front of it and learns to either surf it or create the waves of disruption myself? I think there's a really proactive piece of that I like a lot, right? Like it gives some sense of control to us as leaders to say, I'm not creating all the ocean. I'm not creating all the waves that are coming at me or around me. But I am going to take some control over the fact that I'm okay with this constant activity of new things coming. And my job and my role is to, if someone else has created it, I'm going to learn to ride that wave well. And I'm going to proactively try and create some waves of opportunity for myself and my organization more proactively. And anyone can do that. It doesn't have to be some huge, $1 billion product that you're launching or something, right? Like, we all have ways that we can think about doing things better and differently. And ultimately, it just takes engagement, like caring about the mission, caring about your role and help for this organization achieve its 15-year vision in the example that we're using. And ultimately really digging in and saying, you know what, like I'm gonna try and make it better. And, and I'm going to think of a new opportunity or disrupt something that we've always been doing. I look back at a few years ago when I was at Pricewaterhouse, we ran a stop doing challenge in the innovation team, which was like, we went out to the U.S. firm and said, give us ideas for things that we could stop doing that are redundant or not necessary or a bad process or whatever. And then we financially incentivize the winners of those competitions and like give them a little prize. It's amazing all the things that we do that we shouldn't be doing, but we just do them anyway because we've always done them. And so, I think when you draw people's attention to it, it doesn't have to be like, I created the most innovative thing ever. Engagement really just looks like, I'm going to find a new and better way to do it. And I'm going to stay there. And I'm going to help ride this thing to completion. And so, it can be big waves and small waves, whatever you want to use that metaphor. But I do think that leaders have to embrace that level of thinking to stay competitive in this new environment. I think, to your point on what doesn't work well, disengagement, right? I think there's no longer a time where any employee of any job type is going to be able to go to work and say, I gained that skill in my 20s, tradesman, ironman, plumber, I don't really care what it is. I'm no longer going to need to update my skills over time. I'm good, right? Like, the number one job in the state of Ohio is truck driver. I went to truck driver school. I'm now going to be a truck driver for 30 years till I graduate or until I retire. I'm good. And so, we've got autonomous trucks coming. We've got, new and better, trucks that even if it's not driving itself, the driver's got entirely new skills and capabilities around what they need to be doing to stay effective at that job. Like, we have to constantly be staying on top of our own skills, our own ability to ride those waves and stay, a productive surfer in this example. And if we don't, it's to our own detriment. We will get, displaced, I think, or the company itself will fall behind if its collective workforce aren't doing that. So, it means that we have to constantly be kind of at the wheel paying attention, if you forgive me for another metaphor. But I like where it gets us. It keeps us active. It keeps us engaged. It keeps us sharp. But I think the days are gone for someone who just wants to go punch a time card and keep that job safe.
Got that. And then, so in terms of like actually implementing that, I really liked your idea of, the stop doing challenge. Do you see, and have you seen teams, do they do this as one big push, as in they do an offsite meeting, they come out with some ideas? Is it that it has to be like initiative that's driven by somebody? Is it that they do it on a quarterly or a daily? Is it that it's like within the DNA or the culture of the organization to say we sort of just challenge everything, and anytime there's an idea, we have somebody sort of question it? What are the things that, if we were to do one thing tomorrow morning in order to develop our ability to be flexible and malleable as an organization? Obviously, it's been pushed upon us, which is like the digital transformation led by COVID, but any other sort of processes, because as I see it, organizations have been hit with this big transformational change, and then there's these iterations that happen constantly. And for some organizations, which I'm sure you've seen, they've been around 30, 40 years, and a lot of them have been doing the same thing for 30, 40 years. Now they're reacting to this big thing. And then within the big thing, there's the smaller waves or aftershocks, if we think about it from an earthquake perspective, that are forcing their hand in terms of innovation, or rather, I would say, presenting an opportunity for innovation. So in all of the organizations you work with, what are, like, if somebody were to implement something tomorrow to say, hey, would it be having a meeting and talking about it? Would it be questioning something? Would it be looking at like a business model canvas? What would you recommend if you were to for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, very practically speaking, there's that old adage, what gets measured is what gets done, right? And so, I think, executive teams, CEOs, have to be at a place where they're comfortable saying, this is our long-term vision. This is where we're going and what we're going to drive towards it. Are you in or are you out? And, and if individuals aren't okay with that vision, then they should probably, find someplace else, quite frankly. And so, then you start to say, okay, well, now we know we should be, or we have an aligned culture and vision and strategy of where we're going, right? The people that are here are the ones who believe that we can do this, and it's the right place for us to go. And then you have to go down to the individual and say, what is your role in achieving that? And people have to believe it. The individual is not stupid, right? We understand that we need to find a way to engage and feel like there's some ownership, and the role that we're doing helps meet the purpose and the overall goal of that organization. I think people get off track when it's either CEOs don't do a great job of communicating what their vision is and where they're trying to take everyone, or there's a disconnect in transformation efforts about why would I change what I'm doing currently, which is working for me, to help you achieve something what I don't even totally understand it, and I don't know my role in that new future. I mean, it's scary enough to say, I need you to work different, think different, change your mindset, unlearn, relearn, do all these things to get yourself future capable. And then the person still doesn't know what their new role is going to be in that new future. That's scary. Like anyone would resist that change. And so, I think that we have to do a really good job of saying, very tightly and over and over and over again in the media, in our trainings, in our keynotes, in our company meetings. Again, let me remind you, this is where we're going. This is where we're going. And just being so repetitive at it, and then setting up the systems and processes for people to understand their role in it. They're being measured against it, and not measured in a stick way, right? Like if you're not on board, you're in trouble. And they like, if I understand my role in this, there's a new financial incentive for me to be able to get a hold of by changing, right? People need to feel like they're being rewarded and they are understood, and that they are really having their company say, this is your new role. And when you move to that, here's the exciting new capabilities that are going to be at your fingertips. New incentive models, things that are going to happen where, you can increase your career, accelerate faster. Then it makes it exciting. We all know where we're going. I know what I'm doing in this new future. And I've got, new capabilities where I can either get recognition or get, a bonus or things that are going on around it. But you have to align all that. And it ain't pretty. It's hard work. But I think for me, when I see companies fail at doing it, it's like, this grand new vision is released. And then, the individual line worker or manager, or even sometimes senior managers are like, sounds great, but what do I do to help achieve that? And it's a missed opportunity. Whereas the ones I see be really successful are the ones who are like, I understand it. It's very clearly articulated. I know where we're going. It's going to be hard. We're going to change. But ultimately in that change, I know what my new thing is going to be, and it's going to be even better for me. And then people will do it.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, it's I don't know what the word is, but I'm happy to hear you say that, because that's really, at SME Strategy, that's exactly what we do, is we help organizations go through that process, because it can be painstaking. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen it with hundreds of organizations. It's like, how do you get that alignment? How do you get that buy-in? How do you get that engagement? And how do you have that common language across everybody, that everybody's like on the same playbook and talking about how to move forward? So I'm happy to hear you say that. And I'm really like looking forward to, hearing more from you in terms of helping people be future ready and how to, take advantage of this exponential change as the future goes on. So Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people connect with you? Where can people learn more about what you do, and how can they get involved?
The website is fasterfuture.org, and they can reach me there and learn more about our services and buy the book.
That's excellent. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate you joining us today. It's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you, sir, for having me, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
My guest today has been Nick Davis, who is the managing partner at Reaching the Future Faster and the author of Future Ready, A Change Maker's Guide to the Exponential Revolution. And one of the things I really appreciate about what Nick shared today is really looking at the different possibilities the future can take. And then depending on your sort of temperament and depending on how you work, looking at, a long-term future, or being like moment by moment, knowing where that certainty is, and then finding your level of comfort within that, and then getting your team engaged in that. So be sure to check out Nick and some of his other publications, because I think you'll really enjoy them. And if you have somebody in your life that's dealing with change and transformation, please send them this podcast so it'll help them in their journey. So once again, my name is Anthony Taylor. This has been the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you subscribe, and I look forward to sharing with you next time.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. If you're in the process of renewing your strategic plan and you're looking for a framework to align your team and to create a clear vision, clear goals, and a clear roadmap on how to get there, be sure to check out our signature course that will walk you through the process that we've used to create hundreds of strategic plans successfully for organizations all over the world. You'll get instant access to all the videos and documents right away. And so whether you're planning a strategy session in 3 months, 3 weeks, or 3 days, you'll be able to get the most out of your meeting and have everyone be on the same page and bought into your plan. It's the exact same framework that we've used for our clients, and we've packaged it in a way that you can use it easily yourself. So visit smestrategy.net/course, and you can use the code podcast for $100 off. That's smestrategy.net/course, and use the code podcast for $100 off, and you'll get instant access to all of the tools to help you create your strategic plan successfully and have everybody moving forward on the same page. Once again, this is Anthony Taylor with the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you real soon.